Good afternoon. My name is Mick and I am a travel curious tour guide and also a licensed London taxi driver. And this afternoon I want to take you on a journey through the rather deserted streets of St James and Whitehall in the heart of London. Now you're probably wondering what we're doing outside in the time of lockdown in the UK. Well, it's because both myself and the cameraman, Graham, we're both cab drivers and we're outside. And we're outside because we take people from A to B in London, and essential workers especially are finding that taxis are a great and safe way of travelling around London in these troubled times, because after each journey the taxi driver jumps in the back after the passengers have left, of course, and gives everything a wipe down with some disinfectant, making it safe for the next passenger. We also have a glass partition that separates the passenger from the driver. Instant social distancing. Talking of which, we will be following the guidelines on social distancing as we go around. So the journey is one of subterfuge and intrigue, involving organisations that would probably like to keep themselves secret, like MI5, MI6 and the KGB. We're going to take a journey to the heart of the shadowy world of international espionage. And I want to explain just what London's place is in that world. So follow me to the first stop just round the corner. Here we go. Now, no publicly accessible building in London takes us closer to the heart of that shadowy world of espionage than this one. This is the luxurious St Ermin's hotel you can see in the background there. And it was converted to a hotel from a mansion block of high-end apartments back in 1899. And because of its close proximity to the headquarters of the British Secret Service, it became a very convenient and discreet venue for British agents to meet at, especially during the 1930s and 1940s. By 1936, the Secret Service was so familiar with this hotel that MI6 took over an entire floor in here and installed a rather shadowy group called Section D. D for destruction. And they were headed by Major Lawrence Grand, and their task was to plan sabotage. Okay, we've just got a helicopter overhead. And their plan was to sabotage strategic sites. Probably landing at the barracks. All good? Section D's plan was to sabotage strategic sites throughout mainland Europe because it was feared that these countries would fall during the anticipated conflict with Nazi Germany. At that time, the other guests in this luxurious hotel would have no idea that they were sleeping either above or below a huge stockpile of high explosives stored there by Section D for use during this planned programme of sabotage. In July 1940, a series of meetings took place here involving the British wartime Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill. And it was decided that all these shadowy groups like Section D and others would be absorbed into a much larger one called SOE, the Special Operations Executive. And according to Sir Winston Churchill, their plan was to set Europe ablaze. Oh, hi there.
We're just leaving. We're just doing some filming for a tour, an online tour, because we can't do them live.
And they was absorbed into SOE, Special Operations Executive. And they were supposed to set Europe ablaze. Their headquarters were up in Baker Street, which is why they became known as the Baker Street Irregulars. But this is their meeting place. Inside is the Caxton Bar, and we know that various naval intelligence officers, such as Ian Fleming, who went on to write the James Bond novels, and also singer-songwriter and raconteur Sir Noel Coward was also an intelligence officer. But other people used to meet here too, like the Cambridge Spy Ring, a group of notorious traitors including Kim Philby and Donald MacLean. Philby recounted in his memoirs that he was interviewed here after first being approached to join MI6. But he also used to meet his Russian handlers here and his fellow double agent Guy Burgess, who worked for the Secret Service and the KGB and had an office in here. Now, St Ermin's are very proud of their tradition and their historical connection with the Secret Service. Inside they've got things on display like a silk scarf discreetly printed with radio codes used by secret agents out in the field, and every year they host the Intelligence Book of the Year Awards. That is our first stop. Now if you'd like to follow me, I'll show you where MI6 had their headquarters in the 1920s. And if you're wondering what MI5 and MI6 are, the MI stands for military intelligence. MI5 deals with internal security, like for instance in the Second World War they deal with counter-espionage, cracking German spy rings, and MI6 would deal with British interests abroad. They were involved in SOE, setting up agents who were going to set up this sabotage, like setting Europe ablaze, and we're going to see one of their headquarters coming up soon. You'd probably notice how deserted the streets of this area are. We're in St James's. Known for its connections with government. All these buildings around us are pretty much government buildings down the end. By the way, you can follow us on staycurious.tours. I'll use the hashtag staycurious. If you want to leave any messages, you're welcome to do that. We'll also be jumping in the licensed taxi, but we're nearly up to our second stop here. So we're going to be telling you stories both factual and fictional, because of course this is the area where James Bond would have had a lot of his activity. Right, we haven't seen a single car yet in St James's. Right, just position ourselves over here. How about here? Is that good? The building right behind me with a mansard roof, number 50, when this building was completed in 1926, it became the headquarters of MI6, Military Intelligence Section 6. And at its head was Admiral Sir Hugh Quex Sinclair. And he took over on the death of his predecessor and also the founder of the British Secret Service, Sir Mansfield Cumming. Now he took over his role, he also took over his code name, because all MI6 chiefs have the same code name, C. It doesn't stand for chief though, it stands for Cumming, after the founder. Now Sir Hugh had his residence just round the corner, and that was connected with this building via a tunnel. Everyone loves a tunnel. And one of the first things he did as chief in here was to sign off approval for the installation of a brass plaque by the door that proclaimed this building as being the headquarters of the Minimax Fire Extinguisher Company. Now, just as in the fictional world of James Bond, the trading company Trans World Enterprises was the cover for James Bond's Secret Service, so in the real world, Minimax Fire Extinguisher Company was the cover for the British Secret Service in the 1920s and 30s. But not everyone was fooled. Taxi drivers, because they used to drop people off and pick people up here all the time, they knew what was going on here. And one taxi driver decided to play a little prank. He got a piece of chalk and drew an arrow right by the door with a little sign next to it saying British Secret Service, this way. But it wasn't just taxi drivers. The German Secret Service also had a clue what was going on. So they sent a secret agent to keep an eye. And he was disguised as a blind matchstick seller. And he used to stand just opposite the door, monitoring the comings and goings of the top brass of the Secret Service. Kim Philby had an office in here, the notorious traitor, MI6 spy turned KGB double agent, and he described his surroundings as being a dingy warren of wooden partitions serviced by an ancient elevator. But it was very convenient for him because he only had to walk around a corner to St Ermin's to meet his Russian handler. When they moved here in 1926, they moved out in 1964 south of the river to Lambeth to a very ordinary looking apartment block called Century House. This time it was the bus conductors of London that had their little joke, because when the buses used to pull up at the bus stop outside, the conductor would say, "Would all British spies please get off here?" Ding ding. Now we're going to go back into the cab to show you a secret bunker. Follow me. So, and here is our trusty London taxi. Okay. Right, as you can see, this is the interior of our cab. There's a partition between me and the driver over there. You might be able to see Graham just through the partition there. And all the surfaces are plastic, easily wiped down with that disinfectant and wet wipes. So we're going to take a little 2-minute ride to our next stop, which is going to be a secret bunker. And the area we're in is St James. We are just coming up to Westminster Abbey. I'll show it to you out the side door. So this building you can see in front of you, this is Westminster School. Very exclusive school, dating back to the 16th century. And you should be able to see Westminster Abbey, final resting place of over 3,000 individuals, including various kings and queens of England. It's also the site of the tomb of the unknown warrior, which has been there since 1919. There's the main entrance you can see. This building some of it dates back to the 13th century. It has been renovated, of course, over the years. And you've also got St Margaret's Church there, which is known as the MP's Church. The Members of Parliament use that for their services. So we're just going to be going around Parliament Square. On the other side of the square, we've got the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben, not looking his best. He's being renovated at the moment. He was in a James Bond film once. He was in Thunderball when Spectre needed to give a message to the Secret Service. The Secret Service had to make sure that Big Ben chimed 7 times at 6 o'clock, just so Spectre knew that they had received the message. So this is the Treasury, which we've got on the corner here, and this is where we're going to be stopping in a second. you might be able to see a park opposite St James's Park, and that has always been known as a place for secret agents to exchange documents. It has a pond in there, and the footbridge over the pond has been known as the Bridge of Spies because of all this espionage action. So we're just stopping here on the right, and I'll hand back the camera to Graham. We're just putting up outside the Churchill war rooms. You might just be able to see them just in front of us here. Are you right there? Right, so this is the Churchill war rooms. And in 1938, when war with Nazi Germany looked inevitable, they decided to build a bunker underneath the Treasury. And they only completed it 4 days before World War II was declared in September 1939. And it remained operational throughout the Second World War, right up until August 1945 with the surrender of Japan. And then it was put into mothballs. It was abandoned right up until the early 80s, when it was taken over by the Imperial War Museum and turned into one of London's top attractions. There were hundreds of people down here during the Second World War. It had a hospital, it had dormitories, it had canteens, broadcasting and communication and equipment, but it also had living quarters for the chiefs of staff, plus meeting rooms for them all to discuss the operations in the Second World War. Winston Churchill had his own living quarters down there. He used to spend the day down there, but not the night. He preferred to sleep at his own place, which was 10 Downing Street, just up the road. Even when the bombs were falling from the skies during the Blitz, he'd much rather stay above ground at number 10 Downing Street. So the next stop, we're going to discuss what went on during the Second World War at the Admiralty and a certain author who used to work there. So there's the Treasury, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Now you'll be able to see a sentry box in a second. Just over here on the right is the gates, the rear gates to 10 Downing Street, which is the home of the Prime Minister. And we wish him well, because he's not very well at the moment, suffering with coronavirus. Now the buildings you can see here with the green arches at the top, the green domes, is the Admiralty. And we'd like to stop briefly just around here and tell you some stories about that. Right. Right. The building that looks like a fort, that's the Admiralty Citadel. Built between 1940 and 1941, it was used as like a fort of last resort, just in case Nazi jackboots were heard marching up and down the Mall. It's pretty much impregnable. Some parts of it are over 20 foot thick. And what it was meant to do was protect the communications equipment for the Admiralty next door. Now, during the Second World War, room 39 was occupied by a Naval Intelligence Division officer called Ian Fleming. He went on to write the James Bond series of novels. He came up with all sorts of ways of deceiving and eventually defeating Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. At the beginning of the war, he was in charge of Operation GoldenEye, and those of you that are James Bond fans might recognise that name. Spain, at the end of the Spanish Civil War, became a fascist dictatorship, and in 1939 it was feared that they might join forces or possibly be invaded by Germany and Italy. So Ian Fleming's idea was to plan to sabotage the place, because at the very tip of Spain on the south side is Gibraltar, a British territory of great strategic significance. In the end, he didn't need to use this plan, but it was very important to him, because at the end of the Second World War, when he moved to Jamaica to write the first James Bond novels, he called his villa Goldeneye, and it was also a film later on in the series starring Pierce Brosnan. One thing we know that he was very proud of in the Second World War was his commando unit he was in charge of, Assault Unit 30, AU 30. These were a division of battle-hardened commandos who included a criminal element. For instance, Johnny Rominski was a safecracker. He was a Scottish-Lithuanian safecracker, and he was part of this commando unit, and they used to be parachuted into enemy territory, break into various headquarters in Germany and Italy, and then steal documents, go back to Allied territory where all these documents would be put to great use. They had some great successes, but they also had some great nicknames. Ian Fleming called them his Red Indians. General George S. Patton called them a bunch of limey pirates. And other members of the British Armed Forces that came into contact with them called them Indecent Assault Unit 30 on account of their activities with the local ladies in newly liberated Paris. Now, one more stop for you. We're going to talk about the founder of the British Secret Service just round the corner. Okay. So there's the Admiralty with the green domes on top. And there's the Citadel, covered in Russian ivy, which is quite ironic. And this, we've just got the police memorial that you saw just there, the blue one. This is the Mall. And we're just going to go through Admiralty Arch. Which gets us onto Trafalgar Square. We're now pretty much in the direct centre of London. So you can just about see Nelson's Column there. And on the far side of the square with the dome, you might just be able to make out the National Gallery, which was where James Bond, as Daniel Craig, met up with Q, Ben Whishaw, in the galleries within it, looking at an old Turner painting. There's Nelson on the top, proper British hero, Admiral of the Fleet. Dropped it. Admiral of the Fleet during the Napoleonic Wars. There's the Strand, and just over here, so you've got King Charles I, he's here as well, where his statue is. We're heading down to Whitehall. And all the buildings pretty much in Whitehall are all government buildings. And that's the connection with our next stop. So you've got Downing Street a bit further down. This is the old War Office, which we're next to. There's the Tank Memorial. And this building on the left is the Royal Horse Guards Hotel. And we're going to stop just outside it to tell you the last stop we've got in a tour of London and its espionage connections. So this hotel, this building is the Royal Horse Guards Hotel. And this restaurant, you can see the canopy for it here, is called the 1212, and that was the phone number of Scotland Yard, whose offices are right down the end. They used to answer the phone, Whitehall 1212, and you can see a plaque, Sir Mansfield Cumming. As you can see, died in 1923, the first chief of the Secret Service. He founded the whole thing, and in 1909, when he created the Secret Service, they were down by Vauxhall Bridge, which is where they are now, over 100 years later. You've probably seen MI6 being blown up in the recent James Bond films such as Spectre and Skyfall. His office was in here, number 54. Even getting into his office was a bit of a chore because he loved secret and intrigue. You had to go through all sorts of secret panels and doors and levers to get into his office. He signed off all of his documents with a C in green ink. And C became the code name not just for him, but for all chiefs of MI6 ever since. A very eccentric character. Maybe you can tell that by the green ink thing. When him and his son were out in France with their Rolls Royce in 1914, they were driving through the countryside when they crashed and the Rolls Royce rolled over. It threw his son clear, but he was mortally wounded. And Sir Mansfield was trapped by his leg underneath the vehicle, underneath the Rolls Royce. So in order that he could give comfort to his dying son, he took out a penknife and amputated his own leg. But when this ordeal was over, of course he now had a wooden leg, but he didn't let that slow him down. When he needed to get around the local offices like the War Office and the Admiralty, he used to propel himself around on a child's scooter. But he also used this during interviews with potential recruits. He would be talking to the potential recruit, and then suddenly he would grab this like letter opener, like a knife, and stab himself in the wooden leg with it. And if the potential recruit flinched or gasped, then he knew that he or she would not be the right stuff for that particular job. And with that, I'd like to conclude this little journey through the world of espionage in London. You can keep in contact with us on staycurious.tours. You might be able to leave us a little something there. And also keep in contact with the hashtag StayCurious. Now, my name has been Mick. I'm your Stay Curious guide for today. And above all, stay healthy and stay curious. Thank you.